Hello and welcome to our guest speaker for today, Dave Taylor, who's a longtime entrepreneur with great insight to share. He has also been a judge at our e-fair, in case he looks familiar to you if you were present last year. And I will pass it over to Dave.
Thanks, Gina. And hi, everyone. I'm super glad that you're watching this because I have a lot of great stuff to impart. Honestly, the kind of thing your teacher might not tell you. So, entrepreneurship is not only in my blood, but I'll bet it's in your blood too. It's something where you just look at things and you're like, how could I make an opportunity out of this situation? And that's great. But part of that reality is that by trying to constantly come up with solutions, means, sorry to say this, you're going to fail and you're going to fail again. And so the challenge as an entrepreneur is really learning how to get up, not how to actually experiment necessarily. So I pulled together a couple of slides with a little help from my AI friends, and I would like to actually go through them with you. So here we go. So my talk is going to be on, as you can see, Unleash Your Inner Entrepreneur, a guide to following your dreams. And I will tell you that this is much more about, and I am much more interested in helping you do things that you love and to be passionate about what you do than in helping you make lots of money. Now, if you do it right, often you will make a lot of money, but let's start out at the beginning. And no, this isn't me. Pretty much, I think all but three of my images are generated by Adobe Firefly, which is this fantastic AI tool. So no one has ever looked like this boy. And I don't think that's a real car, but it can do all these great pictures. So I'll talk about that a little more as we get further in. But for now, let me just tell you that from the get-go, I have been an entrepreneur, and this probably is something that'll resonate with you, is that even when I was in middle school, I was like hustling for money because I wanted to like go out and like have fun with my friends, and my allowance wasn't really cutting it. So I would go door to door and ask people if I could wax their car. And you're like, wax your car? Why would you do that instead of washing your car? Because it took an hour or two and I made a lot more money. So that worked out really well. And by high school, I actually was running an ad in the local newspaper fixing bicycles, where it was mostly just fixing flat tires. But I'd just work in the garage and people would wheel their bikes over and I'd charge them, I don't know, 5, 10 bucks. And it was really fun because I enjoyed doing stuff with my hands. And I was probably clearing $50+ a week just doing that. So that was really fun. Does that sound like you? Are you the one that's like figuring out how can I make a buck out of this deal? Totally fine. That is part of the entrepreneur journey. So, obvious, the question is, what's entrepreneurship? And so I asked ChatGPT to give me a definition, and then I fine-tuned it a little bit so it actually made full sense, but I thought it came up with a pretty good result here. So, entrepreneurship is being a creative explorer in the business world. So the way to think about that is that you're an adventurer and you're setting off on a new journey to create something unique, your business. Now, unique's a funny word in that because you might do something that they have in the next town. You might do something that three other kids in town are doing, right? You might do something where, oh, yeah, there's a company coming to town that is actually going to open up a business that does that too. But that doesn't mean you can't compete. Part of being an entrepreneur is being endlessly optimistic, is that, there's always that hope. There's always that belief that, well, yeah, the supermarket does sell custom made sandwiches, but I can do a better job. I can make a more tasty sandwich and I can make a few bucks off of each one. So I can pay for my little sandwich cart. So, second half of the definition, you take risks, come up with fresh ideas, and work hard to make your idea successful. Whether it's starting a lemonade stand, which you can still make money at, or inventing the next big app, we we entrepreneurs are the trailblazers of business. And it's really true. If you start to study the sort of history of businesses, you'll find out that a lot of big companies have succeeded by buying little tiny companies that have created these great innovations. So Microsoft, most of their software came from little startups they bought. Google, most of its software, like the entire Google Docs suite, which you probably have used for this very class, but that was all bought and they were separate little companies that Google acquired and then integrated. So a lot of the big companies that seem to have like this huge edge on things actually got all their smarts and all their innovations from the acquisition of little tiny companies that they have bumped into. And so those little tiny entrepreneurs, those, little think tanks in the garage that have started to prototype something end up doing great because then big company comes along one day and says, we want to absorb you into our world. Pretty cool. So a great way to start is to ask yourself, not how do I make money, but what are you really passionate about? So I have three kids, and I can tell you each of them is passionate about different things. And we constantly have conversations about how do you turn that passion into a revenue opportunity? Because there's a great line that I've heard that if you love what you do, you never do a day of work. And I think that if you ask your teacher, they're probably nodding right now and saying, that's why I'm in this classroom. So what are you passionate about? What are your interests and hobbies? What have you already gravitated towards? And what are you already something that your friends are like, oh, yeah, you should ask her because she knows everything about that, right? So here's a fun way to visualize that. And again, this is another AI generated image. This is not, I didn't hire a painter. But this is the rocking chair test. So imagine now we have zoomed forward, I don't know, 40, 50 years into the future. You're now grandpa's or grandma's age, and you have kids sitting around and they're asking you, tell me about how you started in business and what all you've done, because no one ever talks about that. Now, do you want to tell them about your colorful and interesting career and how you followed your passion? Yeah, probably. So what does that look like? What would you do if you knew that it was going to be something that was going to bring you joy? So I will say, and this has absolutely been true for my entire career, which has been more years than you've been alive, that happy people pursue what fills their heart, not their wallet. And if you know anyone or you have anyone in the family that's really, really wealthy, odds are they're probably not very happy people when you scratch below the surface. They might have shiny toys and a fancy car and go on fancy vacations, but I know a lot of wealthy people and they're always clawing to get to the next thing and they don't really know what they stand for and what their purpose is. And I know you're a bit young to have these heavy conversations, but if you can figure out what you're passionate about, that's an excellent launching pad for you to figure out what to do with your career. And entrepreneurship is going to be just that fire that's burning inside you, where it's like, I got to make this work. I got to come up with something. And as I've said, and I'll say again, you will fail and you will have to get up again and you'll have to try something else. And that's just part of it. So ideas are really powerful. And I know everyone's always like, you got to get this great idea. But it turns out that what's really important is implementation or execution. So I worked years ago with a what's called venture capital firm, and it was out on Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto. So it was part of Silicon Valley. And this is where like billionaires are made. And these companies invested in little tiny companies like Google that became big monsters. So lots and lots of money flowing. And I remember learning from them that, I was working with them and endlessly they would say, we don't care about ideas. Ideas literally are a dime a dozen. What we care about is, can you bring it to market? Can you make it happen? Can you actually execute on it? And that turns out to be really important. So it's the implementation that's so important. So don't worry about sharing your ideas with other people because they're not going to do it. They're not going to have it be their passion and their drive. And if they do, they're going to do a sort of half-hearted effort, and then it's going to just fall down. And so it goes. So here's some examples. So you've heard of Facebook. So Mark Zuckerberg actually invented Facebook while he was at Harvard, and he coded it in his dorm room. And here's a fun little fact is that Facebook was originally designed to be a dating app. So it's come a long way since then. And then there's a skincare company called Carol's Daughter, and founder Lisa Price created it from her kitchen table in her little tiny apartment in Brooklyn. She just really had a very stressful job and on the side experimented with like skin lotion and skincare and then just started selling it to friends and it has taken off. Michael Dell, this is going back a couple of years, but when he was at UT Austin, he was building PCs for friends and dorm mates and stuff. And it just kind of got out of hand. And so he ended up renting an office space and then he quit. I'm pretty sure he didn't finish his degree and he just launched Dell Computer. And they're probably one of the five biggest computer companies in the world at this point. Two more. Melanie Perkins created Canva, and she just wanted to take the idea of these graphic tools, but make them easier and easier so that everyone could create a banner or could create a little Instagram version of a photo or something. And then finally, two guys that I think are really interesting is Mauricio Meza and Jorge Silva created something called Komodo Open Lab because they wanted to help people with disabilities access mobile computers and devices. So they created a tool called Tekla. And again, this was from their tiny little office in Toronto. So the ideas were really important, but it was really doing it. You can imagine if Michael Dell would have said, yeah, I know you want me to make you a PC and you gave me $300, but there's a really big concert going on, so I'm not going to get to it. So that would have ended pretty quick. So when you think about having these great ideas, you also have to ask yourself the question of how do I turn that idea into an actual business? And one of the things you got to do is overcome challenges. And this was not an AI generated image, just for the record. The AI couldn't understand the concept of a cat hanging from a rope, so it just kept failing. But this is such a big idea. And this is true of actually just life. And it's also true of adulting. And every adult you know, from your parents and your uncles and your aunts and your teachers on down, everyone has failed. Everyone has made stupid mistakes that they regret. They have said things where even immediately they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Okay, now I need to recover. It happens. So you are going to fail on your journey to success. Your first version of something might just be a complete fail. In fact, you'll probably fail again and again, but that's okay because it's not about making sure you never fall down. It's really about always being able to get up again. And I think that's super important. And so the way that I have done this in my life is I have really tried to experiment and learn from the results of my experiments, regardless of whether they were positive or negative. So I will launch a product and then no one wants to buy it, or the feedback is it's way too expensive or whatever. And then I have to have this reality check of, oh, well, what does that tell me? What assumptions did I have that might not have been true? So for you, you might say, I'm going to go door to door and I'm going to wash cars and I'm going to charge them only $50 for that car wash. And you think, I have a power washer. It's going to take me an hour. It's a lot of human labor. I have two other people I'm working with and I have to pay them. And you go and you knock on 50 doors. And consistently, every single person says, that sounds great. I'll pay you 20. And then you say, oh, well, that's a problem because I can't afford to run the business on $20 car washes. So you have failed, and it is time to iterate and ask yourself, what could you offer that would make people think $50 was fine? Or how do you lower your costs so that you can afford to do those car washes for what the market is telling you, $20 a car wash? It happens and it's okay. So to me, it's not about being super paranoid that you never make mistakes. It's about being able to be a little bit humble so you can say, wow, I did that wrong. I'm sorry. And to be able to recover and come up with an even better idea. And so you're thinking, okay, but I mean, like successful people don't fail, right? Welcome back to that. So Plan your business. This is one of the ways to minimize that failure rate, right? You're never going to get it to zero, but you can at least improve on it by asking and being able to answer some basic questions. And now we're really getting into not only the criteria for your class, but this is exactly the criteria we use in eFair when we're judging and evaluating presentations, from the poster board onto the pitch, is how are you going to actually make money? I cannot tell you the number of times I've had people talk about business ideas where it's just like, so where's the revenue? I mean, it's all well and good that you're giving all this away for free and you're changing the world and you're improving like carbon sequestration, whatever, but somewhere there needs to be revenue because businesses cost money to run. So critical question number one is, how are you going to make money? And then that ties directly into what is your product or service worth. So that $50 car wash could be fine. You might be able to figure out a way to charge and have people happy to pay you $50 for a car wash, but you got to figure out the worth of what you're delivering. And what's your upfront investment? If you say, well, to do that car wash, I'm going to have to build a physical car wash facility. Okay, well, now you got a lot of expenses. So you not only need to figure out what they are, but you need to figure out where you're going to generate that revenue prior to starting to make money. And you think about it, a lot of the companies that you interact with and the organizations you interact with have just this challenge. If you go over to Subway to grab a sandwich, think about that franchise owner. He or she has had to drop hundreds of thousands of dollars to open the door the very first day to be able to make sandwiches. And then they just hope people come in and order, enough sandwiches and come back the next time. How will you find customers? This is perhaps the most challenging part of any business. It's great that you have a business. It's great that you've implemented. It's great that you have all the equipment. Now, how are you going to get people to come in the door? What competition's already out there? I will say I am a big proponent of you going and doing lots of competitive research. If you want to actually have a door-to-door car wash, go and take your mom's car, whatever, and go through all the car washes in town and understand what are the pros and cons of each one. That one's really popular, but you have to do the work yourself. Okay, so people that want someone else to wash their car aren't going to come to this. But the one where they wash it for you, there's an expectation of a tip, which means that $20 car wash actually was $30. Okay, well, do people leave looking pretty happy? Do they want the inside of their car washed, etc.? So analyze and understand your competition. And then, of course, how are you going to be better than them? Because you want to be competitive in that market. And finally, here's one that seems pretty easy at the very beginning of your journey, but it is pretty darn important, is how are you going to find reliable people to help? And this might not be your best friend. It might not be your cousin down the road. It might be people that are committed and have the same passion to deliver the same product you do. And again, if you're in ninth grade and you're making jewelry while you're watching your favorite Netflix show or something, then sure, 3 of your best pals could be there with you, and that could be a fun evening. But if that starts to scale up and you really start to have a lot of popularity and a lot of sales, are they going to be sticking to it? Are they going to be willing to come over 3 nights a week or spend the entire weekend making these things? Or are they going to be like, yeah, that was super fun for that last one night, but I've got other stuff I want to do. And there's this great new party, So reliable people tend to be another one of those challenges. So, and this is actually, I think, my favorite image of all the images here, is what you need to do is you need to take action. There are so many people that are dreamers, and I love them all. It is great to have a dream, but the question is, what differentiates an entrepreneur from a dreamer? And the answer is action. So that is going to be scary. You are going to be putting yourself out there. You might be knocking on the door of that house down the road where rumor has it they're really mean. But if you want to ask everyone in your neighborhood if they would buy your product or service, you're going to have to knock on their door too. So conduct research, create a prototype, If you want to try to convince people to buy your, I don't know, let's just say your new designer shoes, then you better have some samples. So try to then sell it to friends and family. That's a good place to start. And I'm not talking about your smart aleck friend who's going to just be giving you grief or just say, yeah, I'll buy it, even though you haven't started talking. But people that are going to actually have good questions and they're going to say, well, I did just buy $160 Nikes. So why would your shoes be better? And how do you manufacture them so that I can actually have good foot support when I'm like playing basketball? You know, so trying to sell it to people that are on your side, but actually still might have good questions can be a really eye-opening experience. One of the other ways you can take action is set up an online store. It's not very hard to set yourself up as an eBay seller or on Etsy or something like that. And then just see, you can learn a lot. And I'll tell you, there are tons of YouTube videos on how to be more successful as an Etsy seller or how to set up your store or how to take photos or how to write descriptions. So the process of educating yourself can be really powerful too. And again, I said this before, and I'll say this one again too. Buy your competitors' products and ask yourself, what could I do better? So you better believe that Subway franchise person has gone to every sandwich shop in town and bought a variety of different sandwiches and then sat there and just opened them up and dissected them and looked at them and looked at the packaging and taken photos of their menus and really asked themselves, how do I do all of this better so that the customer who isn't sure where to get a sandwich comes to me because that's how I'm going to be a success? Because they don't want to open up a sandwich shop and sell 3 sandwiches a day. They want to sell 30 sandwiches an hour or possibly more. So we're getting there. I'm almost to the bottom here. So a couple more slides. Here's one that's actually really fun. So Hershey's chocolate, right? So this was founded by Milton Hershey. And here's something people don't know is that his first and second chocolate businesses both failed because he was trying to figure out the formula and it was really tricky to get it where the product would actually be what's known as shelf stable. So it would still taste good 3 weeks later after he had shipped it via truck to a market where it would just sit on the shelf. Mark Cuban, I'm sure most of you know his name. He is on Shark Tank and he owns the Mavericks. He's a very wealthy fellow. I love that his first business idea was to sell powdered milk. And he had exactly one customer, his parents, and no one else ever bought that product. So what did he do? Did he say, the heck with this, I'm just going to go work somewhere? No, he said, well, okay, that was a bust. Let me try again. James Dyson vacuums, and they have hair dryers. They have all sorts of super expensive high-end products that are very successful. He built 5,000 prototypes before he came out with a vacuum that he was ready to actually try to sell to other people. 5,000 prototypes. Even if you do one a day, think of how many years it took for him to actually really dial in exactly what his product would be. And it turns out it was very successful. And Vera Wang, so that's a Vera Wang bridal dress. It's a beautiful dress. Vera Wang was actually an Olympic skater, but she didn't make the Olympic team. So her journey to get the big bucks as an Olympian just sort of fell flat on its face. So then she went to Vogue magazine with the intention of being the head of that magazine, very big, important fashion magazine. She didn't get that job either. So she quit them all and she just said, fine, I'm going to make my own darn brand. And she is tremendously successful. So all of these people have in common that they have failed and they've continued and they've learned from that failure and they've tried either something different or they've tried to refine what they were doing to do something better. And it's okay if you try this and even if you like go to the e-fair and you don't make it into the final cut. All right, well, maybe you can sit around with your pals and you can ask the question, what could we have done differently? What did we learn from the people that did make it into the final cut? Oh, they actually had sales and we had a great idea, but we had never actually talked to a potential customer. Okay, well, so next time, maybe talk to a couple of customers or actually sell your product or service. Maybe it's that you have sales, but you don't really have a vision or a story. It's just like, oh, yeah, I don't know, we just make this stuff. So that's not the basis of a business either, because you want to be able to clarify and state quickly, cleanly, and succinctly, this is what we do. This is what we ship. This is what we represent. And here's where we're going into the future. And that's something, again, you can just say, well, let's refine our vision. Let's make this a little bit more of the business story as opposed to just being, here's some stuff that we do. Okay, so I'm down to the final slide, and you have been sitting and watching all of this. That's fantastic. So here's what I say. Pursue your dreams, but be smart about it. Yes, you're going to fail. You don't have to fail a lot, though. I mean, you don't have to look out and try to be a fail, right? You want to try to minimize that. If you're learning how to ski, your goal is to not fall down. And then once you get to that point, then you can start getting better and mastering some more skills and trying more challenging hills and such. So I would suggest that the formula here is probably, maybe not exactly, but it's have an idea, test the idea, refine the idea, and then iterate, iterate, iterate. If you ever wonder why there's always new versions of things coming out, it's because companies are constantly trying to make them better. They're absolutely never the intention of having it be worse than the previous version. Why would any of us buy a phone that was worse than the previous generation phone, or buy a car that wasn't as good as last year's car? So all of that gives you the ability to be a maybe overnight success. But in fact, the more you do your homework, the more you'll find out that all of those overnight successes were years in the making. It's just like, again, being an Olympic athlete or making it to the pro team for the NBA or something. They have been playing and exercising and training and practicing their whole lives. So if you look around and you look at your friends or even the other people in your class and you're like, man, they all got it together and I'm the only person that doesn't quite seem to have it. If they do have it that together, it's because they've been doing it for years. And you can be that person too by actually doing instead of just thinking about it. So that's what I got. I would open this up for questions, but at least we have my fellow people here. So Gina and Audrey and Rebecca, hit me up with some questions. Let's have a conversation now. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for all of that, Dave. It was very beneficial. One of the things that comes up for me when listening to you is when you have an idea and it fails, how do you stay resilient? Or how do you build up the resilience muscle to know that you're worthy of another try? Like what should a student do to be able to foster that for themselves instead of just backing down and not trying again?
That's a tough one. And I know as a kid, there were things that I was willing to try and try and try. And there were other things where it's like, yeah, that's hard. Nah, that's not for me. And number one, give yourself permission to not be super excited about it and maybe even just take some downtime. So you try something, it doesn't work, take some weeks off. You aren't actually the most successful seller of Girl Scout cookies in your troop. That's okay. Just take a breather, and then your passion will ignite, and you'll start having that flame get bigger inside you, and you'll be like, I think I know what I could do differently. I want to give it another shot. And sometimes you just say, maybe my passion is elsewhere. I'm going to try something totally different. And that's okay too. I mean, if you talk to your parents, you'll find out that most of us have had more than one job in our careers. And often the transition between jobs represents different type of work, which means we also, as adults, have been trying to sort of refine and figure out, where do I want to go? And sometimes that might be, what do I want to do now? So I talked about that rocking chair test, but you don't really need to pressure yourself and say, what do I want to do for the next 25 years? It's just like, what sounds fun right now and, can hopefully pay the bills. I mean, you're in high school, you don't pay the bills yet, but eventually you'll have to pay bills. And don't pressure yourself to come up with the perfect thing because it's such a dynamic world. And with like things like AI and global politics and economics, you never really know what it's going to be in 5 years anyway. So just try to find that happy medium where it's something that you're really into and you enjoy and you can tolerate the pain of, the inevitable like dull meetings and annoying bosses and, tedious hours. And you can like manage and suffer through all of that because you're also having successes and it's also feeding your dream and feeding your heart.
Thank you for that. Another question that I have is how important is it to have like the right group of people around you or some kind of coach, just to keep your, having different perspectives, maybe from different people to, give you feedback and that kind of thing.
I think that's hugely important. And I will tell you, one of the mistakes I made when I just got out of college was I hung around a very negative group. And it was a very insecure group, which I sort of look back and realize, but everyone was just endlessly critical of not just everyone around us, but of each other. And so we all ended up just sort of perpetually feeling kind of bad about ourselves. And once I started to find more positive people to spend time with, I started to feel more positive too. So, on the one hand, you want to find from a business perspective people that can help you with your business. But the most important thing is to surround yourself with people that make you feel like you can do it, support you when you're doing well, help you when things aren't going well, and are there for you when things might even like crash into the ground or something. And it's just like, oh, well, I owe some money and I didn't earn anything this week, and they're not going to just be like, later, loser. So I think that's really important. And then the other half of that is I could tell you stories of really tremendously dumb things I did in my business career because I didn't have a coach and I didn't have counsel. And my parents were both like business employees. So they never actually had done their own businesses. So they didn't have the experience of that. So I couldn't turn to them and say, so, Dad, here's this situation. I'm not sure how to proceed. So, I'll give you one example, just one. So, one of my startups that I founded was an auction website tracking service. So, you could just tell our little, honestly, it was like a sort of a fake AI. You just tell it what you're looking for, and it would email you a report every morning from all the auction sites of here's everything that's new in the last 24 hours. And one day I got a call from Amazon and they said, we love what you're doing. Could you be our email service of record for Amazon auctions? Now, had I have had counsel, I would have said, oh, heck yeah, and then hang up the phone and said, oh my God, I have no idea how to do that. I have to figure this out and I got 24 hours. But instead, what I said was, no, I don't think I could scale that high. And they said, okay, bye, click. And that was that. Ended that opportunity. So, one of the great reasons to have counsel is so that you don't make dumb mistakes all by yourself. So at least you have someone to bounce it off who actually has some level of expertise. That might be your teacher, that might be your pastor, that might be that wonderful aunt who has been super successful and just knows everything about everything. And don't be afraid to reach out, even if you think it's a dumb idea. I promise the people that are really good mentors and really good advisors will never say that's stupid. What they will say is, have you thought about? And then they'll give you some other things that will help you refine your idea so that you come up with something better.
I love that. Thank you. Any questions from anyone else?
I'm just curious what like your favorite part is about being an entrepreneur.
Autonomy. So it was really great when my kids were younger and they were still in like K through 12 is I could just be arranging my schedule. So it's 2:30 in the afternoon. I'm done for the day. I want to pick them up from school and then go play and maybe take them to sports and not be that guy who's sitting there on my laptop trying to have a meeting instead of watching my child do that sport or something. So the autonomy is huge, but with it come two challenges. Number one, you still have to put in enough hours to actually be successful. And you also have to be able to reel it in so that people aren't like, do you know what a weekend is? Because you work endlessly. And being able to find that work-life balance can be hard. And there are a lot of jobs, especially if you end up working for some other company, a lot of times they expect you to put in 5, 6, 7 days a week of work. And you sometimes have to push back and say, honestly, it's my mom's birthday and I'm not coming into work because we're going to go out for the day. So being an entrepreneur gives you much freedom to be able to do that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I think that flexibility is something that youth find very attractive in, what they're kind of looking for their futures. So thank you.
How about the rest of you in the audience? You can't ask because you're not live.
Yeah. So any other your presentation was so thorough, but is there any other like bit of advice that you would give to students who are, who might have an entrepreneur spirit, who are kind of thinking that that's the way that they want to go, but maybe don't have their idea yet?
So there's a whole lot about adulting and a whole lot about business that's very serious. And I think sometimes it's too serious. So my advice to you would be to always remember to try to have fun. So I have been to hundreds of trade shows, and the fun is in meeting new people and spending time with them. The actual going to lectures from people where there's 700 people in the room and it's on some big projector behind them, that's not generally very fun. So I would say always try to find some fun piece to it, and that'll help keep you motivated. And of course, when you're doing your own work, if you have to be sitting there assembling little widgets by hand and it's 11 p.m. and you're tired and you've just got to finish it up, crank the tunes. Just do something fun so that it makes that a little bit more tolerable. So have fun. Woot.
Perfect. Thank you. And if we don't have any other questions, I think it's safe to say we could wrap up. I appreciate your time very much, Dave, and all of the insight that you shared with us and the students who will be watching this video.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. And for those of you out there, just do it. Trademark.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dave.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.